Rev up your engines!
TMH says, Scotty, do you really think automakers will only sell EVs after 2035? I don't think so, because as that famous baseball movie was, if you build the stadium, they will come. Well, if you build electric cars, it's turning out people aren't buying them. The companies that sell them are telling the manufacturers, please don't send any more electric cars until we sell the ones we have, because nobody wants the stupid things. I really doubt it, unless there's some type of radical transformation in the battery technology or whatever they're using for power. People just will refuse to buy them in the United States as they stand today. No infrastructure. Electricity's bad enough expensive. It would be even more expensive. There's not enough of it generated. So I really doubt it. Damien says, Scotty, I recently just bought a 95 Ford Taurus with only 63,000 original miles. It was an older person with a 3.8 VIX. What do you think? In its day, it was a decent vehicle, right? The V6 engine had enough power. The problem is, it's a 95. The thing is 29 years old. So many things can go wrong with a 29-year-old car. Check the fluids, make sure the radiator isn't cracked. It's a plastic radiator, right? Check all the hoses, the rubbers, the brake lines to make sure they're not leaking brake fluid. I mean, it could be an okay knock-around car. I would not personally jump in a car like that and drive to California because it's too old and things probably can start leaking at any time. But with the low mileage, it should last. But you're going to have to watch all the rubber parts for being rotten, especially the tires. Check them out, too. Ryan Watson says, Scotty, how do you patch hoses with the cracks or leaks? Do you have to replace the whole hose? Well, generally, it's a pretty good idea to replace the whole hose, right? I mean, they're not generally all that expensive. Here's the thing. What a lot of people don't understand. When hoses get cracked and start falling apart, they start cracking from the inside out. And you don't see the inside. If it actually starts leaking out, the inside is generally cracked everywhere. A better idea to change the whole thing out. And like I say, if you really want to check a hose, take the radiator hose off of like the top of your radiator, get a flashlight, look inside. The outside may look fine, but if the inside's all cracked, they crack from the inside out. So let's say you even had one section where it cracked and it broke off. Oh, well, I could cut it and splice it together. You splice them together, old hose pieces that are probably cracked on the inside. Just replace the hose. Tracy Betts says, Scotty, what is the best way to remove hard water stains on a windshield? Vinegar and water works quite well with a razor blade. If you're talking about the outside, you can scrape them all off, no problem at all. That'll take them off. I mean, there's all kinds of polishes you can get. Now, if you got a really hard stain, I use a polish. It's made for polishing your waxed paint on your car. It's a polish. It's not a wax. It's a polish. And it comes in those orange cans, right? And you can actually polish glass with it too. Not just the paint. You can polish the glass. And that will polish any water stain. And it will also keep your wiper blades from going when it isn't raining much, because then your glass is all smooth. You can get them. It comes in an orange can. It's a polish. It's not an automotive wax. It looks like a wax, but it's actually a polish. Buy it and you'll find out that once you polish those windshields, you get rid of all the water stains, and then your wipers won't make any noise because it's smoother. It's polished, the glass. John Mulheen says, I live in a good neighborhood. Is it worth installing a catalytic converter anti-theft device on my 2018 F-150? Now, people are stealing less catalytic converters because the price of the precious minerals in them went really high, but now it's coming right back down again. So they don't get that much money for them. And if you live in a good neighborhood, and if you got full coverage on your car, your insurance will pay for it anyways. If somebody does steal it, somebody stole my sister-in-law's Prius one, her insurance paid for it, so she'd have to pay for it. But you live in a good neighborhood and you don't go to dive bars at night and leave at 3 o'clock in the morning, you're probably okay as it stands. Peso says, Scotty, I got an 05 Infinity G35X. It overheated. I replaced the thermostat and the radiator, but it still overheats. I bleed the radiator, but no fix. There's no heat in the car, too. What's going on? All right. Well, it's very hard to bleed those Infinity engines out. You might want to pay a mechanic like me. We have a vacuum system where it sucks all the air and everything out of the cooling system. Then it's a vacuum. Then we stick the tube in a gallon of antifreeze. Then when we open the valve, the vacuum sucks the coolant in, and then no air will be in your system. Pray you just have air, because if you don't, you replace the thermostat and the radiator. You could have a blowing head gasket. You could have all kinds of problems. But first, make sure the air is out. And you say you also have no heat. And if you have air in the heater core, you won't get any heat, and that's really hard to get out unless you vacuum suck it out. That's just how that stuff goes. Zach says, what do you think of a 2017 Toyota Yaris L with 64,000 miles. It's a hatchback. Okay, they're decent cars. They're runabout cheap cars. They're pretty solid made. I've had many customers with them. If you don't mind a clunky ride, clunkety, 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 clunk, they get good gas mileage. They can go for hundreds of thousands of miles. Me personally, they're a little too clunky. I would upgrade to either a Corolla or a Camry and get a much nicer ride. If you don't mind the way they bounce all over the place and have a rough ride, they can last a really long time. And if it's only got 64,000 miles on it, it's got a lot of life left in it. Charlie Martin says, Scotty, my mom has a 2018 BMW X1 with 25,000 miles. Check engine light and the brake fluid light's on. What should I do? Okay, first just check the brake fluid. It might be low on brake fluid. That'll fix that, right? Now, if you still have the check engine light on, then you got to get it scanned. There are thousands of possible codes. Anything as dumb as a loose gas cap to anything as serious as your catalytic converter's clogged up and burning out. We'll turn that check engine light on. You got to get it scanned. Anybody with a scan tool, even a cheap $30 scan tool, will scan it, and it will give you a code. Then you find a guy like me to analyze it. Or you find the code, Google it. Google stuff, you can get a lot of information, and it'll show you. But you got to get the code. There's too many to guess. Wolfie says, Scotty, got a 2012 V6 Camaro with a manual transmission. It's a toy. I don't drive it much. I changed the rear end fluid. Now it's a slate one. The shop said nothing's wrong. What do I do? Turn up the radio. Now, did you make sure you used the correct fluid? Those have limited slip differentials. They need a very special fluid. You may have put the wrong fluid. I would go to the dealer. I would buy the fluid that was made for it. I would empty it out and put that back in because they're very specific. If you just went to AutoZone or O'Reilly's or Pep Boys and bought some universal differential fluid, they probably sold you the wrong stuff. You need the stuff that was made for that vehicle. Go buy it at the dealer, drain it out, and put the new stuff in and pray that the other stuff hasn't damaged it, right? Because it's a very special fluid. You just don't use universal stuff in them. Tyler Donna says, Scotty, I bounce back and forth using Valvoline or Pennzoil in my vehicle and oil changes. Will it hurt anything? If I use the correct weight and use the full synthetic, I buy what's on sale at Walmart. Well, it shouldn't hurt anything. You know, personally, I like Castro oil. I've used it my whole life. I've never had engines blow up, so I just keep using it. And in my motorcycles, I use Motul, which is a French racing motorcycle oil, and my motorcycles never blow up either, so I stick to what I like. But those are both perfectly good oils. I just personally think, well, you know, you buy one oil, the additives, if they work in that oil, why chance it with another company? Who knows? You know, you just never know, because you're never going to know what the actual additives are. They won't tell me. They won't tell anybody. They say, well, that's our trade secret. You can't get our trade secret. You know, so I find what I like. I use the Castro and I just stick to it. But changing it like that, it's probably not going to hurt anything at all. Occipital Exposure says, I got 2017 4Runner. The brake pedal's soft, like it has too much travel. I replaced rotors and pads, fluid, and bled with a Mighty Vac. The pedal's still soft, mushy. Okay, just change the brake master cylinder. It's typical on Toyotas as they age, you know, and that thing is what? It's 7 years old. The master cylinders often get a little mushy. You got to replace them. Now, if it's still a little mushy, but it stops okay, I would live with it. Because also sometimes the brake boosters can get a little worn and they'll get a little mushy. As long as they stop and they don't keep sinking to the floor and you got to pump them, it's not really going to hurt anything. And the brake boosters cost a small fortune. So if the master didn't fix it, I'd just leave it alone. But often it's just getting a little bit weak, the brake master cylinder, and Toyotas will do it. But on the other hand, I've had people with those that they get a little mushy and they say, 7, 8 years later, they're still a little bit mushy, but they still stop. And they don't care. Fred Anderson said, is there a way to check for a bad timing chain? Well, there's lots of ways. The first thing you do is start it up first thing in the morning. If you hear it rattling inside, then either the chain is worn or the tensioner that tightens it up is worn. Either way, you got to take the front of the engine apart to get to it and work on it. Now, another thing is you can hook a timing light up, put it on the number 1 cylinder, and start it up and let it idle. And if you see the timing is jumping all over the place, like it's -5, 5, 8, and it keeps moving, that means the timing chain's worn because it's stretched, and so the timing mark will flip as it's idling. When you rev it up, it usually stabilizes, but when it's idling, if you see the timing jumping all over the place, that means that the timing chain is worn. Get a timing light, very easy thing to check. Joshua says, Scotty, I got a Honda Element 07. Can the transmission be changed from automatic to manual? Yes, it can, but it is a gigantic, monstrous pain in the butt doing so. You'd have to put in a clutch pedal, the clutch hydraulics. It is a gigantic pain in the But my advice, find one that is a standard and then sell yours. It's easier to sell an Element with an automatic than with a standard. 96% of Americans only drive automatics. So you could get a lot more money for that, and if you could find a standard transmission, manual transmission one's cheaper. So don't try swapping it out. It is a gigantic pain in the rear end. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.